Our first stop today, the Porto Cathedral, one of the largest and most imposing buildings in the whole city. Construction here started in the 12th century, but continued for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. That's why there's Romanesque, there's Gothic, and there's Baroque styles here. Azulejo tiles came to Europe from the Muslims who controlled Spain and Portugal in the Middle Ages. And then in 1503, after the Reconquista, Portuguese King Manuel I visited Seville and was so taken by the Azulejo tiles that he had them installed in his palace in Sintra. And from there, azulejos just took off in Portugal. They decorated everything from royal palaces to churches to everyday buildings. And there's incredible azulejo murals here at the cathedral, both on the terrace and in the cloisters and all over the building, really. Be sure to hang out on the terrace, though, and listen for the church bells. This is the São Bento Train Station in Porto, and you can see how incredibly busy this place is. Is it so busy because it's an important transport hub? Partially, but mostly it's busy because it's a gigantic tourist attraction. Train station is a tourist attraction. Why? Well, look at these gorgeous tiles behind me. This is one of the most magnificent displays of azulejo tiles in all of Portugal. And what makes these so extraordinary is that they depict the everyday life of Portuguese people from 100 years ago, 200 years ago. Jorge Calaço made these tiles, did this design, and they're really incredible. They must reach up 30, 40 feet, and they go 360 degrees around this entire train station. So if you're coming into Porto from Lisbon or something like that, you probably won't come into this train station, but you should definitely make it a point of coming in here. Yes, it's crowded. Yes, it's incredibly touristy. Yes, it's loud, but it is also incredible. If you come early in the morning or late in the afternoon, it'll be less crowded, but still, there'll be people here, and there's all kinds of construction going on around here, so it's loud as well, but it's definitely worth it, especially if you're a fan of azulejo tiles. This is the Igreja de Santo Ildefonso in Porto, and unlike down where we just were, São Bento, this place is a little less busy. It's still busy. I mean, man, Porto is so compact, and there are so many people who want to see all the same stuff. It gets jammed in here. But this is a good place to come if you want to see an example of tiles on the facade of the church. And so these go all the way up, hundreds of feet up. Really gorgeous tiles, and they're done by Jorge Calaço. Yes, the same Jorge Calaço who did the tiles at the São Bento station. Yeah, this is a tourist place. You can hear a guy playing violin down there. Jorge Calaço did those tiles in the São Bento station. Obviously, it's a completely different subject matter. Down at the São Bento station, they're showing everyday Portuguese life, traditional Portuguese life. Here, obviously, we're at a church, religious depictions, but Jorge Calaço did both of them in the 20th century. So, you know, you have tile work stretching back 500, 600 or more years, but even into the 20th century, they were still doing magnificent murals of these tiles here in Porto and in all of Portugal. So it shows you how important the tile culture is here in Porto and in Portugal. If you want to go inside, you can. There's no tile work inside, but the chapel has some nice stained glass windows. Costs €1 to walk in. They also have a small museum you can walk through. not much there. If that sort of thing turns you on, yeah, it's cool to go back there. There's some paintings that are 18th or 19th century that are kind of interesting. They look almost modernist, so that's kind of an interesting thing to see. But otherwise, if you're just here to see the tiles, no need to go inside. You can just stand out here and admire the tile work. We're at the Mercado Bolhão in Porto. This place is incredible because when we first came to Porto in 2019, this was closed. It was being remodeled. They moved the entire operation over to the basement of a shopping mall. So you'd like go into the shopping mall, you go into the basement. I mean, they had good stuff, but it just wasn't nearly as welcoming. But you can see what they've done here. They've remodeled this place. It is so modern and beautiful, but none of that would matter if you didn't have the vendors to back it up. And man, coming in here, the vendors are amazing. All right, you've got your fruit and veg in here, of course. They've got some meat, some seafood, crap like that too. But man, the rest of these vendors, it just runs the gamut. You've got pastelerias, you've got coffee, you've got tea, and then we came here to get these mushrooms. We got this whole bag of mushrooms that I got here, giant bag of mushrooms for €8.50. We got shiitake, we got cremini, we got morels, fantastic. They even have Italian truffles that they're selling here. This is an amazing spot. So we're gonna have our mushrooms tonight. We got a little tomato, we got a little onion, some potato. We're gonna cook that up with some quinoa, and that'll be our dinner tonight in Porto. But I got this little treat. This is a little chocolate treat that we got from, that originally came from Brazil. It's called Brigadeiro, and this particular one in Porto is called Brigadeiro Vinho de Porto. So what they do is, this little tiny plastic container filled with port wine, and it goes on the inside here. So let me show you how this works. Look at that. It's got this little, like a needle, and I hope you can see this. You put that in there, and you get a little bit of port wine in there. This is gonna be, I hope I do this without making a mess. Oh my God. That's so yummy. So, wow. So the Brigadeiro, what it is like chocolate ganache. It's soft. It's softer than fudge. It's super soft. It's like the inside of a truffle. And then they roll it in chocolate jimmies. But this one, like I said, is so unique because you get a little shot of port wine with it. Fantastic. It's going to be hard to have another Brigadeiro in my life without having port wine with it. So there you go. Having dessert first. We'll go home. We'll make a little bit of dinner. Enjoy our mushrooms from the market. This is the Chapel of the Souls in Porto, and this is probably my favorite example of tile work in all of Portugal. Just look at the size of this. The magnitude is what makes it so incredibly impressive. You've got murals of the life of St. Catherine and St. Francis, but they're just so impressive to look at on both this side on the front and on the side. And again, this church is over 300 years old, but these tiles less than 100 years old. So this church was sitting here for over 200 years before the tiles were installed. Must have been pretty plain looking beforehand. Now, you come up here and you are just absolutely blown away by the spectacle of these tiles. If you want to go in, it's free. There's a couple smaller tile murals in there, so that's worth seeing. But the outside is a place where a lot of people come, see a lot of people taking selfies, so it's going to get crowded, but still, like I said, my favorite spot to come and see really, really great examples of blue and white tile murals in Porto. the Bank of Materials, and I'll tell you about this in a sec, but we were walking over here, and it's lunchtime, so we had to get a little bit of food. We stopped at this place called Specia, which is a vegetarian restaurant, and it was fantastic. I had probably the best ceviche I've ever had. There was mango in it and thin sliced cucumber, and it was salty and a little bit sweet. It was absolutely divine. Really, really enjoyed it. Chef was from Spain, so you know he can do cold soup. Karen got the beet soup, which really looked good. Couldn't tell you, I didn't get a bite, so I don't know how good it was. But she said it was good, and I trust her. Then we walked over here to the Bank of Materials, and I gotta say, we're still in Porto. We're still pretty much in the center of the town, but there are not as many big sights to see out here. It's a much chiller vibe. I really, really like this neighborhood up in this area. We were walking by after we had lunch, a bunch of other really cool looking cafes, just people sitting outside. It wasn't so crowded. I mean, you get down into the guts of Porto and it's like, it just feels claustrophobic because everyone is pushing to get into the same churches, to the same cafes, to do the same things. It's really, it's overwhelming. And granted, I understand the hypocrisy of me saying, too many tourists when I'm a tourist myself. But what are you going to do? I'm just saying I like coming out here. It's less crowded, and we're at the Bank of Materials. Now, about this place. I am blown away. I've been to most of the other places in this video multiple times. I've never been out here before. So again, I'm guilty of the crime of not coming out of the center of the city. This place is incredible. Here's what it is. It's called the Bank of Materials. And what they do is they preserve the tiles that are taken off of buildings when buildings are remodeled or renovated, or they tear down a building and it's got all tiles on the outside. They preserve these, and they can come in, and the construction companies, the builders, they can come in and they can put these tiles in the bank. That's why it's called the Bank of Materials. And they can save it. And then other builders or the same builder can come back when they're building a new place and say, okay, what's the design? And they will have the exact design because they have it. They have the physical tile in the stock here. And they've got hundreds and hundreds of these, some dating back hundreds of years. It's extraordinary. Now, you're not allowed to touch. Karen got scolded for touching. You're not allowed to touch. But you can look at these things, and the range of tiles is incredible. Now, I'm standing by this mural. This place is not filled with murals. There are some murals in here. What it is basically a bunch of individual tiles that you would make a design out of. And they have stuff that are just, the classic blue and white, the blue, yellow, and white. They have 3D tiles. They have beveled tiles. Some are like high gloss finish. Some are the matte finish. You can just look at all of these. There's hundreds and hundreds of them. It's really quite extraordinary, and it's free to come in. So, Bank of Materials, high on my list. We've seen some great tile work here, but if you want to dig a little bit deeper, definitely come out here, and it's a cool neighborhood too. This is the garden of the Crystal Palace, and while we were walking over here, we were in a busy part of Porto, and I saw a couple of women in official-looking vests taking pictures of some of the tiles on the buildings. So I asked them what they were doing, and what they told me was there's a bunch of construction going on in the area done by the metro service in Porto, and they were documenting whether there was any damage to any of those tiles from their construction work, because there's vibrations and all, they're digging. So it's possible that there could be some damage. They're documenting it, and if there's any damage, then the metro will pay to get it replaced, refurbished, whatever they need to do to fix it. So that goes to show you how seriously in Porto they take their cultural heritage of the Azulejos tiles here. And I asked them, well, if they do that, Well, then they go to the bank of materials where we were earlier and match the tile and bring it out here. And she was very happy that I asked that question. She smiled and said, yes, that's exactly what we'll do. So, you know, tiles are not only old, but they're also new, and they're working hard to preserve them here in Porto. The other thing that I noticed when we were walking out here was that there are so many older buildings that have facades of tile on them, and they may not be the most beautiful, they may not be in the best shape, but they're all worth looking at. If you just like look up, you'll see facade tiles in one building to the next. They may match, they may not match, but they're still all interesting. So while you're walking around, remember to look up. This place is called the Crystal Palace Garden, and you might have heard a peacock crowing in the background. They have a flock of peacocks here. There's also some chickens and roosters and stuff. It's a nice little garden. If you come out here and you approach from the north end of the garden, you might walk in here and say, oh, it's really not that beautiful. What you got to do is come all the way down here to the south end and look over my shoulder. We're looking over the Douro River. It's stunning, the views that you get here. And it's very peaceful too. It's a little, you get some traffic noise up in the northern part. Down here, it's much more quiet, although, you know, you still can hear some traffic. So there's really not a ton of green space here in Porto. I know we went to Serra Alves yesterday, but that's private. You know, you got to pay 13 euros or whatever it is to get access. This is free. This is a public garden. You can come here. Saw people just laying out in the sun. We saw people picnicking, just hanging out. So this is a really nice place to come to. It's a little bit of a hike if you're coming from the center of the city, but Bolt and Uber are super cheap here in Porto. So if you don't feel like walking, if you don't feel like humping it out here, you can take a cheap ride share. I'm sure there's buses that come out here too. Porto has a good mass transit system. So that'll do it for our look at some of the Portuguese tiles. We were looking to find some gelato, some ice cream on our way out here. I say gelato with a D because that's what ice cream is called here, not gelato with a T like in Italy. But we didn't find any. So that'll be our next mission. On our way back, we'll look for some gelato and maybe cool off. It's a warm day today here in Porto. But that'll do it for this one. I'm doing some other videos on Porto, so if you want to see more about Porto, food and wine and culture, look at the playlist or go to destinationeatdrink.com. I'll be posting all the videos there as well as here on the YouTube channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you down the road.